Greetings, the good academic staff of SPS 102. I am Mert Kartal, and today we will be talking about decolonization and the Cold War. Now, the Cold War was an era of major changes, an era of distrust and turmoil, an era of high level battles between two global superpowers, the United States of America and the Soviet Union. Decolonization efforts also ran rampant through the Cold War. In Indonesia, Sukarno managed to kick out the Dutch in 1949 after 4 years of struggle. In Africa, Algeria gained its independence from France in 1962, and many more examples presented themselves during this period. So, what were the main reasons that so many decolonized, newly independent nations emerged during the Cold War? One integral cause of this decolonization was most certainly the emergence of the United Nations. The nations to be had a chance to experience firsthand what the UN could do during the Cold War when the Security Council used its decisive authority to launch a US-led peacekeeping force to Korea against the Chinese and North Korean forces. The medium of UN for newly forming nations thus appeared to be a strong platform where each nation would have a voice, where they could legitimize their claims and gain a seat at the international table. A second reason was the stance taken against human rights violations by international media. As World War II saw many atrocities in this regard, the Holocaust, the rape of Nanking, and countless others, the importance of human freedom and liberation became more visible, especially since both the US and the USSR tried to keep the atrocities of World War II mainstream as propaganda during the Cold War. One other reason was the weakened state of European superpowers during the Cold War. World War II had left most of France, Italy, the Netherlands, and a significant portion of England in ruins, and the war efforts had consumed a lot of their resources. This led to a necessary period of rebuilding in Europe during the Cold War. The colonial powers thus became unable to maintain their colonies. As Armesto points out, the Dutch failed in their police operation in Indonesia and had to retreat. The French suffered a devastating defeat in Indochina, and the British had to retreat from India because they did not have the capability of combating the resistance and famine in the region. We've been talking about the effects of the Cold War on decolonization this entire time, but what about vice versa? What effects did decolonization have on the Cold War? The most obvious one was the emergence of new fighting grounds for both the US and the USSR. When a difference in ideology appeared in a newly formed country, i.e., when one portion of a country chose communism and the other liberalism, the spheres of influence of the two superpowers began to wrestle for control of that nation. For example, the US regarded the formation of a communist ideology in Vietnam as a major threat because the location of Vietnam was strategically crucial. It allowed a great passage into the Pacific and the Indonesian Isles. If the Vietnamese opted to collaborate with the Soviets, it would be disastrous for the Americans. The Soviets also thought similarly. A US zone of influence this close to communist China, and one that created such a good landing zone for a naval invasion of Asia, could not fall into the hands of the Americans. Thus, the Vietnam War took place and reshaped the structure of the Cold War. The same thing had happened during the Korean War, so the playing field was leveled again at Vietnam, but this time in favor of the Soviets. Decolonized nations such as Cuba and Turkey also played a crucial role during the Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the most vital point of the war, happened on these two decolonized nations, articulating the impact of decolonization once more. The influence the Cold War and decolonization had on each other is undeniable. Dictatorships and oppression ran wild, chaos was prevalent in Indochina, in Tunisia, in Iran. During a period of turmoil and danger, the consequences of World War II were mostly forgotten, even though their impact was still clearly visible. New nations wanted their freedom no matter what and stopped at nothing to make their dreams reality. The never again idea that was so prevalent after the war started to fade, and people, both the superpowers and the revolutionaries, once again returned to their natural form, Machiavellian monsters. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope we'll meet next semester on campus. Goodbye.